would like to call this special meeting of the ARPA Funds Advisory Committee to order on Tuesday, December 14th at 1:03 p.m. And we will start with overview of the ARPA Grant Fund Act. We were allocated $6,430,000 for $30,414, and we received half of that in June, right, Kate?
Jen, was it June? Yeah, we've received half of it, and the other half will come in a year from the first half.
Okay. And I think it's important to understand that some of this is allocated on a town basis and some is allocated on a county basis. And I say that because there has been some discussion about allocating a small portion of the a little bit over 4 million that received to be allocated towards projects that are more conceptual on a regional basis. I think that amount is small. We're looking at 5 to 10% is the suggested amount, but there's no hard number on that as of now. Kate, you want to start with the eligible use? Okay.
Right. So there are 5 broad categories. We call them eligible use categories. We can use the funding to support public health response. We can use it to address negative economic impacts from the pandemic. We can use it to invest in water or sewer projects. We can invest in broadband infrastructure projects. And then the last category is we can use it to replace lost revenue. There's a lot more detail on how those break down. And I believe I emailed you all back in October some good documents that give you a lot more detail on that. There are a few prohibited uses. We cannot pay down unfunded pension liabilities, which, fortunately, we're in a good position that we wouldn't want to anyway. You can't use it as matching funds for a federal grant, such as, if we have the FEMA grant for acquiring a property, we would not be allowed to use it for the town's 25% share. We can't use it to pay debt service or legal settlements. And we can't, they say, call it rainy day funds. We can't just put it into fund balance and keep it. It actually has to get spent. The other thing I want to point out is that we can't use it for expenses that were incurred prior to March of 2021. So, if we decide that one of the uses we want to do is to help restaurants who were negatively impacted and they had created outdoor dining areas, and they did that in July of 2020, we can't reimburse them for those costs. It would have to be things going forward or things that happened after March of 2021.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments right now?
Just to clarify, public health includes mental health, correct?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does.
Thank you.
And I think that's, an important consideration.
Yep.
And Kate, have you kind of begun to put together a tentative list in terms of the governmental side of this, the town side, and of what we might use it for?
Yes, but I have ideas. People have presented ideas. Jen has been working on the lost revenue calculation. But I think we need to decide how the committee is going to operate. If I'm going to make a suggestion, I think, as a group, you probably want to decide on some pretty broad allocations, or decide, where you might want to focus and what you want to knock out completely. And then break down into smaller groups that do some allocations in recommending, like within supporting public health response, what kind of things do we want to do? Within investments in water and sewer, what are the priorities? But there've been a lot of people with their hands out already. And there's some things that I would say we shouldn't do. Some things that people have asked for that we really can't do. Anyway, that was a long answer to your short question.
Yeah. So everybody, I went to the CCM convention, and one of the things I wanted to, there were two meetings that I really wanted to attend, and the ARPA meeting was one. And I had a lot of questions, and I'll be frank, I have more questions now than I did when I went in. And that's because this really is still evolving as far as what we can do, what we can't do, when we have to do it, etc. So I did reach out to our Connecticut Conference of Municipalities State and Federal Relations Manager. This is a gentleman who spoke at that particular ARPA meeting, and he will come to our next meeting and help us with some of the more specific questions or general questions if we want to go there. I think that today it would be good to think more broad term than getting into the weeds on specifics. I think one question to consider is how many projects or how many entities do we want to fund? And I've been advised that maybe 1 to 3 priorities is a reasonable number. I guess how we want the committee to work and what are we trying to do with this? Are we trying to help as many people as possible, or are we trying to do a couple of projects that will be longer term beneficial to the town? So help immediate needs or think longer term. And of course, I'm sure everybody here is cognizant of not creating an ongoing need for revenues from these funds, right? Because these are one-time allocations, and creating an ongoing funding need is not advisable, in my opinion. So maybe have a more general discussion today rather than specifics on what we want to spend it on. How does that sound to people?
Monica, maybe I think that's a great suggestion. Maybe I wasn't sure what to expect about this meeting, but in thinking about it, it strikes me that maybe we characterize this discussion as organizational. This is kind of the first meeting of this group. And I think about just organizing a working group. I guess I'd start with appointing a chair or having somebody just be in charge of the committee. Because one of the things that we'll kind of want to do, I think, in the first phase is some real work that might need to be divided up among members of the group to focus initially on just gathering perspectives. I think we've gotten a good start with that by having an overview of how the Act works and what we can and cannot do. But we ought to extend that and gather up perspectives about what other towns are doing, what people have told us. Kate mentioned that there have been a bunch of suggestions that she's received. The town staff probably has a number of suggestions as to what they do. Local business owners could have that. And so what we could do is kind of set up working groups, again, in accordance with whatever the chair thinks, that would help us gather and organize some perspectives so that we can then have a discussion about where some of this appears to fall out in terms of town investments versus regional investments, short kind of versus longer term, targeted on specific things versus more spread out. I think if we can have some working teams come in and think about that in an organized way, in a meeting or two, we could start to get our minds around some things that might work, and then how we would present that to the public to get either further input or ratification, if you will, so that we get to an end product, which is a smart expenditure of these funds that has public support, that avoids, to the extent possible, controversy. I mean, just some thoughts for your reaction.
So let me give you an idea of some of the things that we've been hearing and considering, and that may help you decide where to go. For the most recent clinics that we've had to pay vaccinators where, earlier in the year, they'd volunteered to do it, but we've had to pay the vaccinators. That would be an appropriate expense. Reimbursing the town for those costs would be an appropriate expense under the grant. And for any future clinics, we're at a point right now where, we don't have volunteers still. So any future clinics we'd have to be paying, that would qualify under the public health response. We may have to curtail services in the parking fund due to lack of revenue. Permit sales have gone well, but daily parking is off considerably. And so, we have the rangers. We recently had to put them on doing additional work to open up the stations. We may not be able to do that. We may not be able to be monitoring the parking lots if we don't get any revenue. So that would be an appropriate use for these funds, particularly under the replacing lost revenue category. Allie was not able to be here, but one of the things we've talked about with Human Services is we don't really have a good handle on how many people might be coming to us for assistance with utilities and with housing costs that were lost their jobs due to the pandemic. That is an area where I think there's a hidden level of need that we should look to address. Our parks were heavily used during the pandemic. New recreational needs have been identified. That doesn't fall, under most of the major categories that we have, but we do have broad latitude on how to use the spending that we allocate based on lost revenue. So that may be an area to consider. And then infrastructure. Basically, anything that will qualify for funding under the Clean Water Fund program is eligible. It doesn't need to be tied to the pandemic. So we know we have some water management issues, stormwater management issues, and some sewer issues that the town is planning to address and needs to address. So that's another consideration. So, that might give you some idea of some big blocks of where we could put these working groups.
Hey, Kate, on your last point on infrastructure, the state, I saw an email from Jim Himes shortly after the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that identified that the state of Connecticut would be receiving $445 million from the federal government for stormwater and clean water remediation. I can't imagine we have any sense for how much of that money we would get, but is there any idea when would we know whether any of that money that's being delivered to the state level would be earmarked for either Darien or for our region?
I don't know. Monica?
You know what, I can speak to that a little bit, Dan. I did meet with Congressman Jim Himes actually yesterday and mentioned this because we just spent the $84,000 on the two studies
Right.
to figure out where we need to work. And he said there are many grants that are available, and he would be willing to help us figure out the best one or ones to pursue. And I do believe that we have a resource there that will help us.
My only purpose in that, making that point is that if we can get money for our stormwater remediation elsewhere, then we can preserve this $6.5 million, or maybe most of the $6.4 million for other purposes, but not to rule anything out at this point.
I think, we could have a group working on what programs we would fund with the ARPA money for infrastructure. And as we work through the progress and get more information on what the federal infrastructure bill is going to give us, it can be adjusted based on that.
And I think Kate's idea of talking to other towns at the CCM meeting, a couple of other towns did speak, and they have really, the process varies. One for selectmen went door to door to businesses to see what they needed. So more on a one-to-one basis with, a maximum of $10,000 to help you. Other people chose one or two projects. So I would say that today, I think it's a good idea to go with John's idea to set up a kind of a framework for our committee and to get the schedule set for going forward. And then to have this person from CCM come in and speak to us. I would like to know exactly what percentage we're being encouraged to keep aside for regional funding. And I would like to know how much we've spent on COVID expenses so far that could be eligible for this. So at this point, I would like to ask if anyone is interested in chairing this committee. Do I have anyone interested? John, would you be interested?
Yes, Madam First Selectman, I shall do your bidding.
Okay.
Quick second on that.
Okay.
I've been trying to get away from the chairman role, but all right, here we go again.
See what you're doing there, Dan. Good job. Okay, so if everyone is in favor, I will, do I need a motion on this, Kate?
I don't think so. I think you can.
Okay. John, congratulations. You're chairing the ARPA committee.
I'm thrilled beyond words. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm gonna think that John would probably prefer Zoom meetings. Is that correct?
Well, if they're in the middle of the day, yeah, and that's probably most convenient for everybody anyway. I think we get done what we need to get done in this formative phase first. As we get closer to trying to get some of these recommendations out to the public, we might just convene something in person, so.
Okay, okay. And so what I will do, John, is I will forward you whatever I receive from CCM, and I will send you Mike's contact information.
Okay.
I strongly.
Mike, who is that, Mike? What
Mike Uzinski from CCM.
Okay, what's his role?
He's the person that gave the presentation on the ARPA program at the CCM convention. His official role is state and federal relations manager.
Okay.
But I think he is probably an excellent resource for up-to-date information because it really does keep changing.
Okay.
He already has been very helpful.
Okay.
I wondered, is there a tape of that presentation to CCM that might be available?
That's a great question.
Yeah, you know what? I will look and see, Martha. But it was, it was very general in nature. Part of the beginning was by an attorney who basically said we will, the appropriation process will go the same as it does currently, which Kate laid out here, ending up with the RTM.
Well, I didn't share that with the board.
Oh, okay. And that it's, we should follow, the interim rule right now. It was more general, but I will look and see if there is a recording of it, and I'll forward it. And I've accumulated other pieces of information over time, so I will get it all to John, and he can decide what's helpful and should be disseminated to everybody.
Would it be helpful if we set up a web page just for the ARPA information for the committee?
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because there's also, Jen and I both attended a seminar that the GFOA, the government finance officers, put on, and I think we can get those slides because it was very good. Monica just alluded to the appropriation process. We do need to go through having the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM approve the appropriation. I've spoken with the chairman of FMB regarding what level of detail he's going to find acceptable and be willing to support, because I don't think we want to be going to them with every individual grant, more looking at broad categories. So I would love to target the March meeting of the RTM to get an appropriation in place. And I think they will be comfortable, the chairman anyway, will be comfortable if we provide some high level detail of, say we're allocating $3 million to sewer projects, and we can tell them what the projects are. And if we propose how we will be reporting the activity in the fund and how we would handle any changes in allocations. At what level do we go back to the RTM if we decide to move money from one allocation to another? So I think we need to, in order to hit that target, John, we're going to need to have some regular meetings, or the working groups break down and do some work.
Yeah, I agree. What I'll do is cook up some notes from this discussion and then have some thoughts on both the process and how this might unfold, say over the next 60 days, once we get through the holidays, say to mid-February, and suggest a calendar of meetings that gets us to the March RTM meeting. And we're going to have to get busy because before that, it's got to go to the Board of Finance. When is the March RTM, and is it before or after?
21st.
Is that
Kate,
before? or
why
after?
are you targeting the March meeting?
Because I think we need to get moving. We don't have to get the specifics, but we can't spend any money without the appropriation. So if April is better, that's fine if we need the additional time, but I wanted to encourage movement.
I think movement is great, and I'm all for a schedule. I think March is with budget season. I know the detail that that RTM will want, and I think it's a good target. However, April might be more realistic.
Well, tell you what, this is meant to be an organizational meeting, not a decision meeting for stuff like that. So Kate, I will take your suggestion under advisement, but I think we need to get another meeting and some working sessions under our belt before we have a perspective as to what makes sense for that. I'd be surprised if we could get to the RTM with a complete suggestion for appropriating all the funds, but we may get to them with something just to demonstrate movement, to your point. And let's just see how things play out over the next few weeks. We're about to go in the holiday season, so I will try to get some suggested work assignments out to the group, just so that everybody has a chance to think about things over the holiday break. And then we'll try to meet, certainly in the next first week or so in the new year to keep going. So,
Good plan.
John, do you
Okay.
want people to
I have a
contact you
question.
with who they're interested, or what subjects they're interested in working on?
that's a great idea.
I've got a question.
Yes, please.
At the end of October meeting, didn't we talk, wasn't there mention that the report has to be in April 22nd next year? So if we're targeting a March
yeah.
meeting, that's going to be cutting it close.
No, Bill, our report can be that we haven't spent any money. That's all we have to actually report. But
Oh, all right.
The portal to submit that information hasn't even been established yet.
All right.
So that's how much of a work in progress this situation is.
I remember seeing or hearing somewhere that the funds had obligated by the end of 2024 and
Yes.
spent December 2026. So
Yeah, I'd heard that as well. That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's,
develop the plans, the better.
that's if you read the funding and the whole, I guess, documentation, there's a lot of information and dates in there.
Mhm.
A lot of can-dos and not can-dos.
Those two dates, the 2024 and 2026, those have not changed. The reporting date that Bill mentioned, that has moved around, but as I said, the portal to submit that information hasn't even been established yet, or wasn't established as of last week. So, but those two other dates, they do seem pretty solid. They haven't, there's been no movement on those.
Monica, I had mentioned to Kate, I have to hop for a 1:30. It sounds like we're about done anyway, but
Yep.
thank you all. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Dan.
And Happy holidays to all if I don't see you
You
first.
too.
You too,
Thank
Dan.
you.
Okay, so I think, Kate, is this the right time to set up a meeting schedule?
It'd be nice if we could, or at least talk about what does or doesn't work. And maybe we'll let the new chairman guide a little bit.
Yeah, I would say, I think this meeting schedule or timing works just fine as a general matter to do a Zoom meeting. Hopefully everybody agrees, and that will reserve our in-person intensity when we need to during the work that we're about to do, and then when we need to be a little bit more public with what we're doing. So maybe what we ought to try to do now is just set up the next meeting to keep the momentum going. Like I said, I'm going to get out a summary of this meeting as well as some suggested workflows to try to get everybody to volunteer. But maybe the week of the 3rd, we could get another phone call like this for 30 minutes to an hour just to review where we are and to go through some work streams that I will shape before the meeting, if that sounds okay to everybody.
Okay.
John, are you saying December or January 3rd?
I wouldn't, well, no, the week of January 3rd, yeah.
The week of January 3rd, okay. Because we do have a BOS meeting that Monday.
Yeah, and I can report at that meeting, but I'm not going to be ready to engage on this, given my
Okay.
schedule, to have a work plan and all that sort of sorted before Christmas.
Okay. So do we want to stick with this time and this date?
Yeah, so the 14th, maybe if the 3 weeks from now on the 4th, this time actually works for me, 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
1-4.
All right, so why don't we plan on the 4th at 1 o'clock? If somebody at the town could send around an invite with
We
a
will.
Zoom link and all that, that'd be great. In the meantime, I will get out some summary perspectives and try to keep things moving by email. If Kate, you can make sure I've got a committee list and everybody's email
Yes,
address,
yes.
so I can do that, that'd be great.
Is this a meeting where you want Mike to attend?
Why don't we ask him? That actually
Okay.
would be good. We can work him into the agenda. That's no prep required for his remarks.
Okay.
Okay, anything
Okay.
else?
Okay.
All right,
So if that's all, could I have a motion to adjourn? Martha moves, second.
Mike,
John seconds. Oh,
That was
wait,
Frank.
Frank second. Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right, terrific. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Mark.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay.